At this point, we are able to create a single level, but that is still quite limited. So in this part, we are going to cover how to create multiple levels. All of that, in the most fundamental sense, is actually kind of easy. All we have to do is to create multiple level scenes. Unfortunately, it isn't that easy, simply because our level contains quite a bit of code. For example, to create the laser or the grenades, all of that codes exist inside of one level scene. If we made multiple level scenes, that would not be available. Now, we could copy the code over, but that would be really inefficient. Imagine later on, you might have hundreds of levels and you wouldn't want to copy over the code every single time. If you had to make a single change, this would just not work anymore. Now, to illustrate all of this a bit better, let's have a look at all of this in Godot. Right now, we have a single level, so I can zoom out and we have all of this. A fairly basic level, but for now, this is pretty good. If I wanted to create a second level, in the most basic sense, all I would have to do is create another scene. This would be a 2D scene, and let's rename it right away to level 2. The name here doesn't matter so much. I am going to delete all of this in just a bit anyway. So if you don't want to code along for this short bit, don't worry too much about it. For this level 2, I could, for example, add another scene, which would be the player. If I save all of this under scenes and levels, there we have level 2, and now I have level 2. This one contains the player, and I guess just so that we have something else, let me add the bed in there as well. So there we have a bed and the player. If you want to test an individual scene, you wouldn't click on this play icon. Instead, you will click on this one. With that, you are only running the current scene. So now if I click on that, the player is still working around. However, now we don't have a camera. And if I shoot, we only get the particles, but we don't get an actual laser. And that is because all of the logic for that happens inside of the level. Meaning all of this code here, 35 lines of code, are only available inside of this level. They are not available inside of level 2. Which is why all of this is incredibly limited. As a consequence, I will close the scene and go to levels and level 2 and delete this scene, because it's simply not an efficient way to create multiple levels. Instead, let's talk about a much better way. The concept we need is called inheritance. Basically what that means is we want to create a parent level scenes, and this one is going to contain all of the logic. So for example, this one would contain the logic for shooting a laser, shooting a grenade, and anything else that we could need. But this parent level scene isn't actually going to be visible. Instead, what we are going to do is when we are creating any other level scene, these level scenes are going to inherit from the parent level scene. That way, they have all of the important code, but we can create multiple instances of that scene. That way, we could have hundreds of levels, they would all share the same code base, and then you could even add additional parts. Godot is making all of that actually quite easy, so let's jump right in and let's have a look at all of that. What I want to do is to have this level as the parent scene, and then I'm going to create an inside level and an outside level, and both are going to inherit from this level. That way, we can keep all of the code we have written so far, and then have two other scenes inheriting from this code. Or at least from parts of this code. You're going to see in a second what I mean. When you look at the top left, there we have scene. And the first entry is new scene. Besides that though, right below, we have a new inherited scene. If I click on that, Godot is giving me another dialog. In there, it tells me to open up a scene. The scene we are opening up would be the parent scene. And right now, this would be level. So this is what I want to open. And now we get another scene. And let me put both of those scenes right next to each other so you can see the differences. Also, I guess I should close everything else so things are a bit easier to see. Right. Now we have the level and we have an unsaved new scene. If I minimize everything in there, you can see now we have the same nodes, but some of them are yellow. So in the original, everything is white. In the inherited one, we have some yellow scenes. The yellow scene means that it is inherited and all of this should be yellow. this may just be a bug, but all of these scenes are inherited from the parent scene. And what is really important now, if I go to the level and I, for example, delete the drone, if I now save the level again and return to the unsaved scene, the drone has also disappeared. Which means that whatever change we are making to the parent scene, it will also affect the child scene. And I guess to make all of this a bit more noticeable, let me rename this scene to the outside scene. And now, once I've renamed it, the bug disappeared. Now all of this is yellow. This is how it should look like. I can save all of this as well. Now I have outside.tscn. And if I run this, we have no change whatsoever. Besides that, I want to create from my level another inherited scene. So new inherited scene. Once again, I want to inherit from the level. So I click on open, and this scene I want to rename to inside. I want to save that one as well, and we have the name right away, inside.tscn. Perfect. With that, we have 3 levels. We have a parent, then outside and inside, with outside and inside being children of the level. The issue now is that both of the inside and the outside levels look identical. And for that, we have to make a few more changes inside of the parent. All of this needs to be quite a bit more flexible. For example, what we could be doing is that this gate isn't necessary inside of the parent. It should only be inside of the outside scene, which means I want to get rid of it. I can simply delete it, and now it's not visible anymore. With that, make sure you are saving this level, and now in the outside scene, this one isn't visible anymore. That being said, we can totally add it again. So with outside selected, I click on Ctrl Shift and A, and I want to add the gate again. And place it once again in the right position, something like this. And also make sure that it's below the player. With that, we have the gate inside of the outside scene, but inside doesn't have it. And a similar thing, if I go back to the level, I want to do with all of the nodes inside of the ground node 2D. So for that, I want to right click and cut all of them out. The level scene becomes really empty. And this is by design. All of this should be empty so we can design the actual level inside of the child scenes. In there, we still have all of the stuff from the parent, and that is because I have to save this level. It's very easy to forget. Now, the ground node is entirely empty. But what we can do now is simply paste all of the stuff we have cut out, and there we have the level again. However, inside of the inside level, none of that is visible. So this is looking significantly better. At this point, I can play both of these scenes. So if I run the outside scene, just the scene itself, which I do with this icon, I can still run around. Everything is working just fine. So this is really good. We also still have the house over there, and all of this is working. Although there's going to be one change we have to make, and that is the gate entrance. This one doesn't work anymore because we have to reconnect the signal, but that is quite easily done. What is much more important now, if I go to the inside level and run all of that, I can run around and there's nothing right now. However, we still have a camera and we can still shoot a laser. We can also shoot a grenade, so this is working just fine. And there, if I shoot it, you can see the camera is still working. That is the basics of inheritance. If you're creating multiple levels, you want to have a parent level that is ultimately quite bare bone. So in this case, we have a node 2D for the level, then a ground node, then the player, and then projectiles. However, then inside of the outside scene, we have the actual images that flesh out the level. And besides that, we have an inside scene. And this one we're going to decorate in just a bit. First of all, though, we have to cover one more thing. And that is that if I zoom in, this area 2D has lost its functionality. If you look at the code, we want to reconnect this signal. But there's a bit of a problem right now. And that is that this outside scene has the level node. So if you hover over it, you can see level.gd. If I go to the parent node, the level, we have the same script, so level.gd. And inside of the inside scene, we also have level.gd, which basically means that all 3 scenes share one script, which might be intentional, but very often it is not. For example, for the outside scene, we want to have the functionality for the gate only inside of this particular scene. Which basically means for the outside level, I want to have another script, and this script should inherit from the level scene as well. And that you can also do quite easily. First of all, with outside selected, I'm going to click on this icon, which is going to detach the script from the selected node. If I click on that, we don't have a script anymore. But now I can add another script, and this one would be outside.gd. I want to save all of that in the same folder, so all of this is looking really good. I can now click on create. And with that, if I run this particular scene, we are losing our access to the laser. So now, once again, we don't have level.gd anymore, meaning nothing is going to happen. Which means we have to figure out how to get all of the code from level.gd into outside.gd. To achieve that, you want to go to level.gd, and then all the way at the top, you want to create what is called a class underscore name. And you can see once you write it, it becomes red right away. Once we have that, Godot wants to have a name for this class name. In my case, I'm going to call it level parent. What this allows us to do is to inherit from this script, which means inside of outside. I don't want to extend a node2d. Instead, I want to extend a level parent. Right now, Godot cannot find it because we have to save level.gd. If I save it, go back to outside, now the error should disappear. And there we go. If I now run all of this again, I can shoot, and you can see I have loaded level, the parent scene. And this one doesn't contain anything right now. Instead, I want to play the outside scene. So if I run all of that, now we have the shooting functionality once again. So this one is working just as before. And that is because with this class name, we can inherit from the script like we have inherited a scene. So all of these functionalities are available inside of outside.gd. What this is going to allow us, inside of level.gd, we want to cut out this onGate player entered gate. So I can simply Control or Command X and get rid of this code because we don't need it inside of level.gd. It should only exist inside of outside.gd. And let me save level.gd really quick. And now in outside.gd, I want to select the gate, go to node, and now player entered gate. We can connect to the outside scene. And with that, we get the signal once again. And inside of there, I want to paste the code in that we had earlier, like so. If I run this scene again and I go to the gate, the player stops moving really quickly. Meaning this code is working just fine and it is only available inside the outside scene. Inside doesn't have anything like that, but it does have access to all of the stuff from the level. Although we are getting a debugger error, and that is because in outside, this should be an underscore body. With this part implemented, we have the two major approaches to inheritance. You can either inherit from a scene, which you do by going to scene and then new inherited scene, or Control or Command Shift and N. You can also inherit from a script, and this you do, for example, inside of laser, you are giving a script a class name. And then on any child script, you are extending this script, not the node you are inheriting from. That is pretty much all you have to know. If you understand that, you can work with inheritance quite well. Now, this is incredibly important to understand, so I really want to do an exercise. I want you guys to create a generic item container scene. This should just be a static object, a sprite, and a collision shape. It should also have a script with a hit function. So if a laser collides with it, you are printing something. This could be literally anything. Let's say for now, you should be printing the word object. From that, I want you guys to create two child scenes. One should be for a toilet, the other for a box. All of the graphics you can find inside of graphics and objects. Finally, there should also be inherited scripts, one for the toilet and one for the box. For both of them, I want you guys to overwrite the hit function, so that you are printing toilet for the toilet and box for the box. Pause the video now and try to implement all of that and see how far you get. I want to get started by creating the parent scene. So in new scene, The root node should be another node, and more specifically, a static body 2D. Let's rename this one right away as well. I suppose item container seems appropriate. Besides that, I also want to give this one a sprite 2D and a collision shape 2D. Important for this one, they don't have any contact. The sprite 2D doesn't have a texture, and the collision shape doesn't have a shape. Godot is going to complain about it, but we can just ignore it. Next up, I also want to give this item container a script. Although first of all, I want to save it. With Control or Command Shift, I want to go to Scenes, and in there, I want to create a new folder. I suppose I could call it Container. All I have to do in there is save it, and now we have an item container. This one should get a script right away. So I attach a script, item container, the same folder, all of that is looking really good. I can create, and all I really want to do in here is to create a function for hit without any parameters, and all I want to do is to print the word object. With that, we have a couple of nodes inside of a scene along with a script. This we want to use via inheritance, which we do by going to Scene and then New Inherited Scene. The parent should be the item container. This I want to open. And let me return to the 2D view, that's a bit easier. Now we have an unsaved new scene with a sprite 2D, a collision shape, and a static body 2D. I want to rename that one right away. Let's call it Toilet. Inside of this child scene, I now want to add the sprite texture, which I'm getting from graphics. There we have objects, and inside of there, I think all the way at the bottom, we have a toilet.png. I want to drag that into the texture, and there we go. We have a toilet. Next up, we will also need a collision shape 2D. And I think for this one, a circle shape 2D would be best. Let's do something like this. This really doesn't have to be perfect. I want to save all of this, and now we have a toilet.tscn. This would cover one of the objects. Next up, I want to go to Scene again, and a New Inherited Scene. For this one now, we have to be a bit careful, because Godot, by default, sets the parent as the currently selected scene, which is the toilet scene in my instance. This shouldn't be the parent scene. Instead, the parent should be the item container. Make sure you select the right one for this one. It can be really easy to confuse. This I want to open, and now once again, I have the same basic setup. Although for this one, I want to go all the way to the top. There we have box, and the box has a base and a lid. I just want to use the base and drag it into the texture. Although, that being said, with this item container, we could add another sprite 2D and place it right below the other sprite 2D, and simply place the lid in there. And I think the lid needs to be moved down a tiny bit, something like this. You don't necessarily have to add this step, but I'm going to use this one later on anyway, so we might as well add it right now. Next up, we have to add a collision shape. And for this collision shape, I want to have a rectangle shape 2D, which I want to space accordingly. That's looking pretty good. Once we have all of that, I can save it. Let's name it crate, and that's not how you spell crate, that's better. Now we have a crate and a toilet. That's a really good start. Inside of the outside scene, I want to add these two new scenes. So with Control Shift and A, I want to add the toilet, and I want to add the crate. I can also place them in a better position, and I think the toilet ended up to be a bit large, but that we can work on later. First of all though, I want to run this particular scene. And now if I shoot at the toilet, we get object, and if I shoot at the crate, we also get object. On top of that, the collisions are also working just fine, and the player can collide with them. So this is looking really good. Perfect. That's a really good start. So once again, we have an item container, and this is a static body 2D with a sprite and a collision shape. This we are using inside of the toilet to give it a certain kind of texture and a certain kind of collision shape. Same with the crate. In this one, we have another texture and another collision shape, and on top of that, we are adding another sprite 2D. Whenever you do inheritance, I guess the best way to think about it is that whatever you're doing to the parent is going to affect the children. However, what you are doing to the children is not going to affect the parents or the other children. That way, we can customize each children individually without affecting any other child. Next up, we have to work with the script. So just as a reminder, if I run all of this again, if I shoot at the toilet and the crate, we always get object. And this is not what I want. Right now, the issue is that the item container, the toilet, and the crate all share the same script. They all have item container.gd. To work with that, I want to open the item container.gd script and give it a class name. Class underscore name. I suppose item container for this one is also a pretty good name. This now allows me to inherit from the script, which I want to do inside of the toilet. First of all though, I have to get rid of the previous script. For that, I want to detach that script and add a new one. It should be called toilet, this one's just fine, and I want to create that one. Really important, I don't want to extend a static body 2D, instead I want to extend this item container.gd, meaning I want to extend this class name. For that, inside of toilet.gd, I want to extend the item container. So far, this is not going to make a difference. So if I just run all of this, I can still shoot at the toilet and we get object. However, this allows me now, inside of toilet.gd, to create another function called hit. This one should simply print toilet. What is now going to happen is that toilet.gd is looking at the item container and gets access to all of these functions, or more specifically, this one particular function. But then it also looks at its own body, where it also finds a hit function. And it always prioritizes its own hit function, meaning this hit function is going to override this hit function inside of the parent. As a consequence, if we are running the outside scene again, I can shoot at the toilet and we get toilet. However, if I shoot at the crate, we're getting object. To work on that, inside of the crate, I should also rename the item container to crate. Next up, I want to detach the script and attach a new one with crate.gd. This one, once again, should inherit from item container. And after that, I want to create a new function that is going to be hit without any parameters. And for now, it is just going to print crate. That should cover everything we need. I can run outside, we have toilet, and we have crate, and this is looking really good. I suppose to demonstrate that we are still getting from level container the basic information. We could, for example, add a method here, let's say func underscore ready, and simply print object was created. If I now run outside again, we get object was created for both of these objects, but the other stuff still works just fine. Which means you could add any kind of function inside of the item container, and they would be available inside of crate.gd and toilet.gd. Once again, it might be a good idea to play around with this yourself. It can be a bit overwhelming in the beginning, but once you get the basics of it, it's incredibly useful, especially when you have multiple objects that are kind of similar, but not exactly similar. Before we finish with this part, there are two very minor changes I want to make. Number one, inside of the level, the projectiles should be below the player. That way, if I am running this particular scene, the lasers look like, well, they don't look like they're on top of the gun anymore when we are creating them. It's a fairly minor change, but once you notice it, it gets really annoying. So look at the gun, the laser always starts on top of it, which isn't ideal. But if we have the projectiles below the player, this is not a problem. Besides that, I want to go to project settings, and there inside of run, we can set the starting scene, which I want to set to the outside level. That way, I can close all of this, and now whenever I click on this button to run the game, we are starting inside of the outside level. The parent level, the player is never actually going to see. It's simply a template for all of the other levels.